And welcome back to the Country Telegraph. Nice to have your company. John Pettigrew has a long history within the Goulburn Valley fruit industry as a grower and director of SPC Ltd. John, who's now retired and living in Shepparton, has served on various water industry advisory boards and water service committees. In 2002, John was appointed to the boards of Goulburn-Murray Water and the Goulburn-Broken Catchment Management Authority. Now, he has a keen interest in the environment, and also the resource management, extensive water policy, and a ton of experience in that area too, and has recently been appointed to the MDBA Community Committee. John is currently Secretary of the Goulburn Valley Environment Group, GVEG, and an active member of the Lifeblood Alliance. That's an alliance of grassroots environment groups and individuals from across the Murray-Darling Basin. He lives in Shepparton, Victoria. First of all, John, thanks for joining us.
G'day, Mike. Good to meet you.
Yeah, I used to work at 3SR many years ago. My wife's from Shepparton, so I know Shepparton very well indeed.
Oh, I'd keep that on your CV.
Well, I'd say it's a magnificent part of the world, isn't it? And I think, and it's because it's so close to Melbourne, it's a nice way for, if you're in Melbourne, you can just pop down to Shep, have a nice weekend away, enjoy some fantastic food and some good vino, and head back to Melbourne on a Sunday afternoon. And it's a magnificent part of the world. Tell us about the Goulburn Valley and its contribution to the GDP.
The Goulburn Valley is, we're situated in the heart of Victoria, we call it, Northern Victoria. With the food bowl of Victoria, but we depend on rural industries in the past, predominantly processing as well as the industries. This has been based on high security water allocations that Victoria has had from very early on for well over 100 years. The processing industries, whether it's dairying, fruit, or other industries, all important. They're situated in northern Victoria predominantly, and even though we do source a lot of material products from southern New South Wales across the border. But no, it's a wonderful autumn day here. The climate in this area is perfectly suited to export pears. Hence, the horticulture industry has been very strong. I could be a bit biased, but
good on you.
It's a wonderful fruit growing area.
It is. It's and I have to be nice because that's where my wife's from. So I have to be very nice about Shep, but it's not hard to be nice either. Hey, tell me about the fuel situation. Is it really creating havoc at the moment?
It's creating change. Mike, there's no doubt all of us have a look at how essential our next trip is going to be. It's certainly almost doubled in price, diesel and unleaded fuel. But apart from that first week when there were huge queues, it seems to have settled down a bit, and no trouble getting fuel in Shepparton at the moment.
Yeah, it's I've often talked to people from various rural areas, right across the country, and the common thread is that government, whether it's state or federal, doesn't really understand the rural sector enough. And they understand a little bit that they head to the supermarket, they're going to find that if the cost of veggies or fruit, other produce is expensive, then they realise that they need to do something about it. But in these people's mind, in my mind, that's probably about as far as a lot of them go. How do we make the governments, whether they're state or federal, sit up and take more notice of for example, of Shepparton? Because Shepparton, like any other area, like you've got Saraisi, you've got places around Victoria, Queensland, everywhere. How do we make government take more notice and appreciate how important the rural and country sector really is?
I think it's demonstrating our ability to change. The Goulburn Valley here has a history of enormous change over the last 30, 40 years. Going back 30 years or so, we had a terrible issue with salinity, rising salinity right through our irrigation areas. And we come together as a community, joined partnerships with all government departments, had the trust of government, and really made some enormous changes. Those changes not only solved the issue of rising salinity and drainage, but it also paved the way for catchment management authorities in Victoria, many other areas. And look, I think it's the ability of communities to give government confidence that they have the capacity to change and the willingness to change. Not always easy, but you have to demonstrate that sort of confidence.
Yeah, I know. When I worked in Shepparton, we actually didn't have horses. We actually had automobiles. But change is generally regarded as a good thing. Is all the change for example, in and around Shepparton and Goulburn Valley, Mooroopna, those areas, has it all been positive, or do you think maybe at times we've got it wrong?
You at the time you suspect we've got it wrong, but looking back, Mike, I lived in a country area just out of Shepparton, Bunbartha. We grew peaches out there on beautiful sandy soils. We lost our primary school in the 90s, and it was a terrible thing to happen to a small community like that. But change happens, and you adapt. The kids get to jump on a bus and go to another school. People now are travelling into Shepparton for work more and more. Times change, but look, at the time some of these things seem insurmountable, but I think it's a matter of us adjusting.
Yeah, I also agree there. I think because part of human nature is that we don't like change, do we? At times, it's yeah, the good old days, and then it's funny how your grandchildren, they say the same thing, and it just keeps going and going. But I think change is important too. But I think we have to protect these areas. We have to protect the rural sector, the farming sector. What is needed, do you think, to protect it, not just from government, but from all the uglies that are happening around us right now?
Look, I think let's say our processing industries are important. We need to maintain those wherever possible. I think the environment has certainly needed some attention. The Basin Plan has stepped in there, but we're an exporting nation, and we can't just ignore our ability to export to these countries. We have to also maintain relationships with those countries. So you can't just put up the barriers against imports. We have to live with those, I'm convinced, but we certainly need to position ourselves better for exporting.
What about water management? What have we done right, and what can we do better?
Look, I think you can always do better. Looking back, the people that have no regrets aren't really living, I don't think, Mike. You'd always do things better, I think, or differently looking back. One of the biggest changes we've seen here on water was the water reforms, which come in almost a decade before the Basin Plan, and that was resulted in the water market being developed, and water being separated from land. Major changes that had both positive and negative impacts on the area. Negative impacts in that it sent water, the ability to trade water downstream to huge horticultural developments, taking water out of our area, but also at the same time damaging our rivers in the process. So I would certainly have made changes there. We needed to have the ability to fine-tune the amount of water being transferred. There's no question that the decision at the time to make better value of the nation's water resources, we were certainly successful there. We've transferred water to areas where the greatest value to the nation is, but in doing so we needed to fine-tune it at the time to make sure there's no unintended consequences.
Funny, my wife, SPC, I mean, there you are, there's a bit of loyalty. But
Yes.
how important, I mean, just using SPC as an example,
Yes.
how important are institutions like, and it is an institution that I think since 1918, I'm sure you weren't there then, but how important is it for a community to have these large factories?
Look, I think it's important to the community. The community relates to companies like SPC. SPC has changed dramatically, Mike. It's not processing the amount of fruit it has in the past, but it's still in existence. The fruit industry as a whole in the Goulburn Valley, overall, the production hasn't changed much. The fresh fruit industry side of it has increased dramatically. The market is looking for fresh, healthy foods more so than processed foods these days. So it's an example of change that was always coming. But no, we've had some very strong dairy factories here with names that go back a long time. But they've changed. The dairy industry here at the moment, in my view, has, if you like, it's changing to more boutique factories. There's probably more processors in the area than we've had in the past. They're not your huge bulk dairy companies that are dealing in bulk products. They're more high value products. The fruit industry's gone a similar way.
Do you, when I grew up, and some say I haven't, in St. Razia, and I lived in a place huge place between Cardross and Sunnycliffs near Redcliffs, which had 2,000 people in it. And we were surrounded by 20-acre blocks. And
Yes.
with this very strong community. And the same for most of the rural areas around, unless you had sheep or cattle, but the rest of it, you had these small blocks. And as time moved on, those smaller blocks were swallowed by a bigger one, and then you have bigger ones. In my opinion, the negativity for that becoming more efficient is that it actually does a lot of damage to the community. How does a community, because you lose people, you lose that sense of ownership, how do you regain or retain that ownership of the local community, at the same time have the foresight and the nous to move forward with what is required?
This gets back to the ability to change, Mike. We had the same issue. We still have the same issue in northern Victoria. A lot of the original fruit blocks were 24-acre fruit blocks. Dairy farms were always a bit larger, but those size blocks are no longer viable in the world we live in today. A lot of those blocks are now what you'd call lifestyle blocks. A lot have been amalgamated and brought in outside interests, big companies that are taking over blocks. Most of that change still requires the same the same amount of employment. There's little change in that, but it's you're correct. You do lose the character of some of those smaller areas, and it's look. I don't know. It takes people in those areas to maintain the enthusiasm of those regions. There's some characters out there. Some people might say Pettigrew is one of them, but the it a couple of people can make an enormous difference to an area. They really.
Yeah, I used to. Sunday, where I grew up, and it was really interesting because we were surrounded by all these Italians. So on Sunday, we'd go to church, come home, and as you're driving past into our driveway, because we had a long driveway into the house on the orchard, we could smell the bread cooking. You know, the Italians have that kiln in the backyard, and you could smell it because we're going over to their house for lunch. And you get to their house, and there'd be their family and neighbours and stuff, and you'd be sitting around eating this. I can never forget it. This fresh bread that was almost like bubble gum. You're chewing it, but ton of butter. There goes the heart, but ton of butter. And then you'd have this chicken in these bowls and other foods, and the menfolk would drink grappa. And I just thought, but it was a great lifestyle, and I had that community feel. And I've been back a bunch of times to my hometown, and it's no longer there. It's just a couple of big supermarkets, and there's big shopping centres, but it's lost that feel. But maybe as housing prices become more expensive in the major cities, that people can actually move to the bush and get a decent place to live in. And they could, by moving back to the bush or moving to the bush, you can start to regrow that community, which I think is so important. And I think you would agree, in our day, it made Australia what it became for a long time. And I think we need to get that community back, because I think that's what made Australians so great.
No, you're right. It was a wonderful place to grow up in this Goulburn Valley. The sporting facilities, we still have them. If young families growing up, and it's we've seen to have lost it, but those crafts are still out there. As one of the benefits of being a fruit grower was that years ago we used to employ a whole lot of Hungarians. They were wild men, but they would come from the cane cutting in Queensland down to pick our peaches, and the Hungarian goulash, I can still smell the Hungarian.
You are my priest at this stage. I'm in confession, and I had my first drink when I was 15, and it was grappa, and it was Louis Montleone and his family's fault, and truly, I had one drink of grappa, and I've never touched that petrol again. So there you are. There's an answer for our fuel crisis, just full of grappa. But they were good days, and I think we need to embrace those and look back upon those with fondness. But we need to move forward. But I think we need to get that community back together again, and that's why SPC was so good for Shep. And Mooroopna, the fruit salad capital of the world. but it made those areas great to live in.
No, we shouldn't forget Ardmona. Ardmona was always competition to our SPC. No, don't underestimate Ardmona. No.
Look, it's been a real pleasure. I have to tell you, I've enjoyed this immensely, and maybe we can do it again. John Pettigrew, thank you so much for your time. What's your weather like today in Shep? I would imagine it's about 21.
Supposed to be about 26 degrees, almost warm enough for me to be swimming in the Goulburn River.
You're crazy. That's crazy.
Perfect.
I like the heated pool. John, thank you so much for your time, and we'll do this again. John Pettigrew there. This is the Country Telegraph.